Good afternoon, class. Today we are going to discuss about photograph work. So, uh, you should, before the end of this lesson, you should be able to define the word photograph. And we have some terms in geography in which some of you doesn't know the clear definitions. And the first one is a photograph, and the second one is a picture, and another one is an image. But today's lesson we are going to talk about photograph. And a simple definition of a photograph is an image of an object, a person, or a scene recorded by a camera on a light sensitive film or paper. So I think you students at home, you have photographs, and you have seen even in our school and in our classroom. So on that note, we have different types of photograph, and the first one we will talk about the ground horizontal photograph. These are type of photograph taken with the camera at the same level as the object, and under this we have two types of photographs. The first one is a ground close-up view photograph. Basically, the scenery from the ground with the camera is focused on a particular object. So on this type of photograph, the cameraman will focus on a specific object. The second one is ground general view photograph. This is taken from the ground with a camera focus on general scenery. So when you look at this type of photograph, you are not sure on which object the cameraman had focused on. The third type of ground horizontal photograph is the ground oblique. So this type of photograph is taken from the ground with a camera slightly held at an angle. So you can see when this type of photograph is taken, you can see some part of the photograph is bigger or larger than the other section of the camera. The second type of photograph is aerial photographs, and these type of photographs, they are taken from air, for example from an aircraft, from balloons or satellite. So under aerial photograph, from the word aerial means air. So under these types of photographs we have two, and the first one is aerial oblique. So aerial oblique photographs that are taken from the air with the camera tilted towards the ground, and I think I will show you a better photo on that. The second one is vertical aerial photograph. This type of photograph is taken from the air with the camera directly above the object or the scenery. So that is direct, that photo is taken whereby the camera is directly above the object. The next thing we are going to talk about is parts of a photograph. And a photograph has three parts. The left part, you have the center background and the right background. And under that, on the left background, we have the left middle background, the center middle background, the left middle background, and the last part is the left foreground. I have the center foreground and the right foreground. The next thing we are going to discuss is uses of photographs, and I think since this is not the first time you are hearing or discussing about photographs, the first use is that it is used in learning geography because they bring unfamiliar features in the classroom, enabling the students to understand them better. And I think you students, you understand better when you see than when you hear. So when you look at these photographs, you'll be able to understand more, and you can secondly, the second use of photographs is photographs show vegetation and human activities which can be used to deduce the climate of an area. For example, we should be able to state or state two types of vegetation. And when we talk about vegetation, we talk vegetation is generally the land cover. So the first type of vegetation is natural vegetation. So natural vegetation, we have some characteristics whereby we have indigenous species such as the merrock and etc. The second characteristic is the dense undergrowth. You know, where there is there is natural vegetation, we have different types of species, or rather, there is a dense undergrowth than in a planted vegetation. The third one is we have different species of trees. So mostly the dominated species is the indigenous one, and another characteristic of natural vegetation is that not all the trees, or rather the vegetation generally is not of the same height. So we have the low height, medium, and those of high height. The planted vegetation, we have the exotic species, and those exotic species we have such as the blue gum, the cypress, and many others. And this vegetation, they are grown in rows, and since they are grown in rows, there is much weeding. So when there is much weeding, there is little undergrowth. Another feature is we have of the same species. For example, in some areas we just have blue gum as the dominant species of tree, and when you go to most of the Rift Valley, you'll see cypress as a dominant species. And the last one, they're of the same height. You know, when those trees have been planted at the same time, there is a high probability that they'll be of the same height when they have not been interfered with. Secondly, on that point, when you use photographs to determine the human activities, we have human activities such as mining, we have agriculture or farming, and when we talk about farming, we have two types of farming. The first one is a subsistence farming, and general or simple features of subsistence farming is we have temporal permanent houses where we have small pieces of land, we have mixed cropping. You can say there is intercropping. You can plant maize, beans, and other species of crops in the same piece of land. There is use of simple tools, and in subsistence farming we can have local breed, exotic breed of livestock, but they are in small sizes. The second, on agriculture, we have crop farming. Generally we have crops, and we have small scale farming and large scale farming, where in large scale farming you can see wheat, coffee, uh, coffee and tea plantations. So when you look at photographs, you will see machines such as, mostly we use the machinery, and we can have processing factories, because when these crops that are produced in bulk, we need factories to process them so that we can use the finish of the end product. So in plantation, another feature is that we have many laborers. We can't have 2 or 4 workers working in a plantation, because that is extensive, as extensive farming method. And another one, when we talk about farming, we have crop farming and livestock rearing. So in livestock rearing, you can have nomadic pastoralism, and that's where cattle grazing in a grassland, same arid region, where the pastoralists are moving from one area to another seasonally, searching for water and pasture for their cattle. And plus we can have the dairy farming, and dairy farming you can have zero grazing, or sometimes you can have cattle with big udders, where that is in dairy farming. Another one is ranching, and in ranching we have paddocks. So there is that temporal division of land where all animals are allowed to move from this paddock to the next paddock as they graze. So when we talk about mining, and on a photograph you will see a quarry, or that's a symbol of mining. When you talk about when we also move to maps, so in mining, symbols of mining is that the first one we have a quarry, the second one you may have a large open pit, and another one is a large, we can have sometimes excavators, because they are now soil is a resource. So on soil, and we have different types of soil. We have clay soil, loam soil, sand, where sand is used for construction. So another activity is lumbering, and lumbering is generally cutting. People cut down trees using power source, and people may cut trees for several reasons. And the first one, you may have people are cutting trees so that they can create room for settlement, and sometimes they are cutting down the trees so that they can look for materials for timber. Timber is used for construction, and timber is also used in making furniture and many other. The third one is aerial photographs show vital information on land use. Now the vital information, it simply means the most important information on land. Another use of photograph is photographs show land forming processes, which helps us to understand the processes. And the land forming process, we have the internal and the external land forming process. The first one we have faulting, another one is folding, we have volcanicity and volcanicity. And faulting is the cracking of crustal rocks due to tectonic forces. And when there is faulting process,
umeshughulikia
wewe tangu enda ukunywe maji ujarudi.
Unajua jana nilitravel
Ngoja ukienda
master planner. Nasema
wewe inatoa video. Inatoa video.
Bila pigani.
Sijui type yake. CH. Nienda Canada kanisa. Nikai.
Shida ni ile iko na network kweli? Ya kuingiza network hivi.
Hapo mbaya ina.
Haina si. Kijana. Uko pesa? Siduguze. kumbe bado una tray.
Eti?
Kumbe bado tray. Kumbe bado squad yako iko chini. Ama naongea vibaya.
Si kweli.
Nimechoka.
Hmm?
Nienda Western jana.
Ah, kumenda.
Nienda catch.
Hmm? Which part specifically? Butere. That's good. You are touring Kenya.
Monday. Uko na pepa hiyo kweli?
Niko nayo kesho.
Gani?
Ya hii course ya communication.
Sasa amesema urekodi nini na mtumie?
To record the video ba.
Bangu.
Hebu sukuma mlango ni rekodi.
Sasa ulifanya entrepreneurship. Aliwalechanga nini hizi?
Vitu tu mingi, hebu nimalize kitu tutakuja na nakuonyesha.
Sawa.
Kwa nini unaifanya saa hii?
Ninafanya entrepreneurship.
Unajua?
Ulifanya?
Bado.
Hebu sukuma hiyo mlango. Sawa sawa. Utakuja na nakuonyesha. Hata ficha zipo. Another thing we are going to talk about limitation in the use of photographs. The first one is colored photographs are generally expensive to produce. You know, it's not an easy task, or not everyone can afford to produce colored photographs. The second thing is black and white photographs don't show the real colors of an object or scenery. E.g., it is difficult to distinguish between coffee berries from green ones. You know, when you have black and white photographs, for example, a photograph showing different types of races, you can distinguish a black man, a white man, an Indian, and any other race, you know. The third one is the third limitation of use of photographs is some aerial photographs have objects which are far away and hence unclear, which may lead to wrong interpretation. You know, when an object is so far away and the cameraman has zoomed it, you may not see it clearly on which object or which part is specifically focused on. The fourth one is the vertical aerial photographs are difficult to interpret without special instruments like stereoscopes. So, you know, when an object is so far away, sometimes some objects or images, they look similar. And so, for example, when you look at the tea plantation, not the tea, for example, when you look at barley or wheat plantation, it is difficult to distinguish between the two. So you may not see, or you may not distinguish it clearly, this barley or this wheat, unless there is a key which has indicated that this is wheat and the other one is barley. Another limitation in the use of photograph is Photographs are difficult to interpret if they are blurred or because it is difficult to distinguish objects which look the same. You know, unless they, as I told you earlier, unless there is a key, you may not sometimes distinguish or differentiate between objects or sometimes some images of some things. The next thing we are going to talk about interpretation of photographs. And when we talk about when a simple definition of interpretation, to interpret is just to explain the thing on the object or the object or the scene on the photograph. And when we are interpreting photographs, the first thing is you determine the title. So the title which has been labeled defines the activity, or rather the main or the theme on that photograph. For example, you may have flooding, drought, you may have nomadic pastoralism, I may have also plantation farming, and sometimes lumbering. So those features, the title will dictate the type of activity which is being carried on that photograph. Secondly, we have estimating of the seasons, and you know we have two types of season. We have the dry and the hot season. You know, when we have dry seasons on a photograph, you may see people wearing light clothes, or sometimes some specifically we may have some type of crops which indicate that that area is dry. For example, you may have some areas which have been planted mango trees. For example, the major crop which is grown in Ukambani, which receives low amount of rainfall. Ukambani doesn't receive rainfall totally, but it receives low amount of rainfall, whereby in Ukambani you may have some places receiving much rainfall, such as Makueni and some parts of Kitui. Secondly, on season, we have a rainy season, and a simple symbol of rain season is you may see some people wearing a heavy clothes. And when you talk about agriculture, there is plantation farming, and specifically we will have these crops. We will have tea, coffee, and wheat. Another one is the interpretation of physical features on photographs. So when we interpret physical features on photographs, first we start with relief. So on relief, we have flat land, we have flat land, and we have mountainous or steep slope. And when we talk about flat land, the symbols, or when you see these symbols on a photograph, it will show that that is a flat land. For example, when we have rice crop, and you know rice crop is grown where in areas that have flat land that are experiencing the problem of drainage. So mostly they will plant rice using a type of irrigation which is furrow. So the next one is irrigation. So the type of crop grown there will dictate the method of irrigation. Another one is combined harvesters. When you see combined harvesters, those are the symbol of there is rice farming. So, and combine harvesters only work in areas that are flat. Another one is a swamp. A swamp is in a flat land, specifically on the lowlands. So swamps are sited in lowlands that are flat, so the movement of water is minimal. Another one is meanders, and meanders will result to formation of oxbow lakes. The movement of water is very low, and the topography is flat. Secondly, we'll talk about hilly, mountainous, or highland areas. And the symbols of this on a photograph is when we have steep slopes, or we may have plantation farming where we have wheat, barley, coffee, and sometimes the rapids and waterfalls. So when you see those symbols on a photograph, it indicates that is a hilly or a mountainous area. The next one is we are going to talk about drainage. And drainage is generally the movement of water on Earth's surface. And in drainage, we have 3 stages. The first stage is youthful stage, or rather the young age stage. So at the young stage, and that's now we talk about the course of a river. And when the course of a river is at a young stage, we have some resultant features which are formed. For example, we will have rapids, we have waterfalls, interlocking spurs. And those features are only formed at a young stage, whereby the velocity of water is high. So there is a high rate of erosion. The second stage is a middle stage, and at this stage, water is quite moving at a higher speed. So when it's moving at a higher speed, the erosion of the water banks is moderate. So we will have some formation of some resultant features such as the meanders and the oxbow lakes. The last stage of a river is the lower stage, or the old stage. At this stage, movement of water is very, very slow, and mostly there is a deposition of soil. Mostly at a river, we will have some features being formed, such as the deltas. We have the distributaries, the floodplains, and at a floodplain, there is a deposition of sand materials. And when you talk about the deltas, we have different types of deltas in whereby I know you just have you know the simple definition for delta, but when we get to Form 3, we will discuss about various types of deltas in which are discussed there. The second last thing we are going to talk about the interpretation is climate, and under climate we have high temperature regions and low temperature regions. For example, and in low rainfall and low temperature regions, we have some of the crops which are grown there. For example, we have sugarcane, whereby most it is grown in plantation. We have grass and sisal. For example, sisal is largely grown in coast province, or rather the coastal areas. We have the scrubs vegetation, whereby it is in semi-arid areas. And another indication of low temperature, high temperature and low rainfall region is people wearing light clothes, for example the shirts and vests. Second, we talk about the cool temperature and high rainfall regions. These areas where we have sufficient, reliable and well distributed amount of rainfall throughout the year. And the dominant crops which are grown there, we have wheat, coffee, tea and dairy farming. And where there is a dairy farming, we need to have cool and wet climate which favors the exotic breeds of cattle, whereby the specific species we have the Friesian, Jersey, Guernsey and Ayrshire. Another thing is the type of soil in the area, and areas which have received cool temperatures and high rainfall, we have specifically two types of soils. We have the acidic and volcanic soils, whereby mostly the dominant crop is coffee and tea, and clay soil, or the rather is also called the black cotton soil, we have rice and cotton. And where there is rice, rice is grown in a type of soil whereby it have that ability to retain much water, and so when a type of soil has a high ability of water retention, it has poor drainage. So rice, and rice needs a lot of water during its growth. Lastly, on the interpretation, photograph interpretation, we have the transport network. And transport network, we have transport and communication. And on transport network, we have various types of transport system. The first one is a motor transport system, and generally this is a road transport, whereby we have motors, so we can have the vehicles and motorbikes. Another one is railway transport, and railway transport, we have railway line and train. And currently we have a new better brand, or a new type of train in the country, whereby in the recent we have SGR, that's the new train. And previously we had the coal, or they are called the coal engine trains. Another type of transport is air transport. So when you see flat tarmacked pieces of land on a photograph, so that is specifically some parts of an airport. So, and when a plane is landing, it's supposed to land on a flat piece of land. And another symbol of an airport, or an airport, we may have aircrafts or jets. So those are, I think, are enough indications of air transport. Second, lastly, we have the water transport. And water transport, on water transport, we sometimes may discuss on rivers, lakes and oceans. But in rivers, we have some few rivers in the continent which are navigable. For example, some parts of River Nile, River Congo and River Limpopo in South Africa. Some parts of that river, it is navigable, but most rivers aren't navigable. So when you see boats, ships and ferries on a photograph, it indicates that there is water transport. And lastly, we have communication network. And when talk about communication is generally a passing of information from the sender to the receiver. So when we are communicating, we must have a medium. So the symbols on a photograph that may show that there is communication on that photograph. We have telephone lines, telephone booths, post office. Nowadays we have TV and radio station, and we have very many radio stations and TV stations in the country, in which some the radio presenters, they speak in their mother tongue depending on the geographical zone where it is located. And lastly, I would like to thank you for being attentive and listening to our class. Let's meet in the next class. Have a blessed afternoon.